Welcome to Built for This, the podcast where purpose meets performance. Hosted by business strategist and human behavior specialist Carly Pepin, this show dives into the real stories behind high-growth businesses. Let's bring life to your vision.
Hey guys, so welcome to the show today. I'm really looking forward to this guest today. So this one's going to be a fun one. I have Mike Kron with me, and he has run a family office for the past 33 years, growing it from 2,500 multifamily units to over 14,000 units today, 4,000 of which they built themselves. Mike has recently launched and is raising capital for Guardian Net Lease Fund, a $100 million real estate offering in a single tenant net lease retail space. So thank you so much for coming, Mike. It's really great to have you.
Yeah, absolutely, Carly. Good to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the business, just so everyone knows what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Well, as you said, I've run a family office for the last 33 years. Uh, by full disclosure, it was my ex-father-in-law's company, and he asked me to come over. He was starting to get a little bit bigger, and he needed somebody to help him come run the business and help him grow. I was all too happy to jump at that opportunity way back when, and now we look back 33 years later, and it never seemed like we were doing monumental things. But then you look back at what you accomplished, and you sort of have to take a step back and say, "Wow, that was a lot of fun." And we've grown. We got into development in the mid '90s, really almost by accident. We had a parcel next to one of the projects we owned, and we didn't know what to do with it. Couldn't sell it, and we finally just said, "Well, why don't we put some more units on it?" So we did that. So we've been largely, it really is the essence of a family office. I mean, we have been family for a long time. The people that have worked for us have been there for ages and ages. They seem to come and never leave, which I guess speaks volumes to what we're doing. Uh, but never willing to sit still for a moment. I decided to launch my own private equity group, ultimately looking at what the future was going to hold for the family office now that the patriarch is no longer with us. And we launched the Guardian platform to start building our presence in the private equity world. And that has been a whole new learning experience for me. The real estate part is easy. The capital raise side is a little bit different than anything I've ever done before because we've never had to. We always just plowed back all the profits from the business and buying more apartment buildings. But we've been out now, and we're starting to raise money. 2026 looks like a pretty good year. I think people have finally just started to get back out there, and you know what? I'm having fun doing it.
That's awesome. I'm curious as well because, just having this family business, you can continue to build real estate, you continue to do that. But what made you decide to also get into private equity as the next step?
Well, I think, the beginning and end of that story really is looking past the patriarch of the family office. And at some point, I need to unwind the family trust and deal with all of those issues. And then the question was, where do we go from there? How do we get to the next step? What do I do with all 480 employees that I have? And part of the answer to that question was, I need to be in the private equity world because I think that we'll go out and hopefully buy the portfolio and run it as a private equity fund. Well, that's all well and good to say, but you need to build a resume in that arena first. And that's really how I got to the private equity side.
Yeah, that's awesome. And tell me a little bit of what it's been like just building that resume as you're doing it.
Well, I get to meet a lot of great people like you and on podcasts and talk about things, which is always fun. Um, somebody told me that when we got into this, I would wish that I was spending 80% of my time on real estate and 20% of my time raising capital. In fact, what he said, what you will really be doing is spending 80% of your time raising capital and 20% on the real estate. That was something that I wasn't I was prepared for it, but you still don't expect it.
Hmm.
And it's been a different experience for me. I mean, I've always been in this sort of sheltered real estate world. I mean, I got out there and I was at conferences and other things, but we were always acting on our own behalf. Now I have to go out and be the front head of the, you know, of the entity and be out there talking to people about come invest with us. Here's what I do. Here's how we do it. And that's, it's been a different experience. It's not part of my natural skill set. Um, but that said, it's been fun. I mean, I've got to meet a lot of great people. I wish up to this point we have had more success than we have. But in talking to a lot of people, 2025 was a pretty slow year for people raising money. But there's a lot of activity out there. I get to be out with a lot of different people. I get to find out about a lot of different things that I really, um, I won't say didn't know about, but really didn't focus on. And that's been a fun journey for me.
Hmm. That's cool. That's very cool. And I'm curious if we step back a little bit just to even you stepping into the real estate company. So tell me a little bit about the dynamic of what that was like. Because even like you said, it's a family business. So how'd that work out in the beginning? I know sometimes it's like sometimes it can be quite tricky.
It was interesting. I mean, I had been married to his daughter for a few years. In intermittently, he had asked me. I was a practicing real estate lawyer. I was working up in Century City. You know, that wasn't where I wanted to end up in my career, but it was a good experience to start. And he had been bugging me for a while, not aggressively, but very softly saying, "Hey, why don't you come work for me? The banks would really like to know what happens if I get hit by a bus. We need somebody else there who can run things." And so we had that conversation over the period of 2 or 3 years. And you know, it's funny now, but I had gone in and my wife had was about to have our first child, and she actually went into labor, and the firm that I was working with gave us 6 weeks of paternity leave. And I was already pretty sure at that point that I was going to go do this. So we said, "Look, come on down here for a few days, explore what we're doing, see what we do, see if you like it." So I went down there while I was on paternity leave to go check it out, and it's like, "Oh, this is kind of interesting." I had when I was in college, I owned an apartment building with my dad that we owned for many years after I left. I had bought 2, 3, 4 unit buildings with a buddy of mine and renovated them, and with a modest amount of success. Uh, but I had been in that world, so it was all very enticing. And now that here's an opportunity to step into a bigger portfolio, potentially with the chance to grow it into something, you know, did I think we were going to get to this point? I can't tell you. I thought that at the beginning, but it was certainly an opportunity,
That's awesome.
and and I couldn't pass it up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I'm curious as well because I know that you started, I believe it was like 2,500 units when you first started. And
Mhm.
then when you came in, was part of your goal to scale it? And what was the first step you took to scale?
It's funny. We never really look because we're privately held and we don't have outside investors. We were never really looking to produce a certain return in a certain period of time. Very different than what I'm doing now with private
Right.
equity. But we were always looking to, he wanted to deploy his money into the business. So the first thing we did, honestly, we had a lot of older C properties, to be generous, in some of the, hot spots of California, like Stanton and Cerritos and Hawthorne. I mean, just and he had started to buy some properties in Texas and was getting bigger there. And he had never understood what a 1031 exchange was, a tax-free exchange. I said, "Well, this is easy." I said, "We
Yeah.
need to sell these things. we'll just trade it and we'll start buying what we're buying in the Phoenix market and the Texas market. And we'll start deploying the money because we can get pretty good money for some of these really older properties and buy some really nice newer properties. And we just started doing that. And it was one building here, one building there, another building. And before you know it, we went from walking to running. And, I still don't look back and say that there was a moment in time when I said, I want to get from point A to point Z. We just went from point A to B and then from B to C and C to D. And it's kind of like you put one foot in front of the other and you just keep going. And, thankfully I had an owner who really wanted to grow and spend the money, and I was certainly happy to help. Uh, and we just started doing that. And before you knew it, we were out of California. We had some beautiful brand new properties in the greater Phoenix, Scottsdale market. We were, had properties in Texas, and then we decided to start building, and that was a whole nother adventure and learning curve.
Yeah, that's very cool. And as you started to gain these properties in other places, tell me a little bit more about like what the employee structure looked like and how it started to change.
Yeah, it had begun to change even before I got there. We had a regional manager in California who actually was a business partner of mine on some other real estate deals, but um, he had already been working for the company. And when we went down to Texas, which was about 3 or 4 years before I got there, he went down to Texas to kind of form that region.
Mhm.
And we were pretty committed to wanting to make sure we had a regional person in each geographic region to oversee what was going on there. We were willing to spend a little bit more money in overhead to make sure that we had eyes on what was going on because we felt that was very, very important. Um, a lot of companies will run a little differently than that, and they'll just stare at numbers and not really focus on the assets. Part of that was, here's one person who owns all these assets and he really wants to know that they're looking good. And part of it was that his time horizon was forever. So he just wanted to make sure. So we'd make sure there was a regional person in Austin and San Antonio and Dallas, and then later in Phoenix. Um, as we started to grow, other challenges developed. Now we have more and more technology. I mean, the apartment business was probably one of the slowest developing software industries of all time. I mean, we were using bare knives and stones until we were pulled kicking and screaming out of the mud. And okay, there's these programs now you can use that'll help you run your business. Now they're everywhere. I mean, now you can't turn around without a software vendor,
Mhm.
emailing you to say, "Hey, come look at what we have." But back then there wasn't. But you know, we have lots of computers. Computers have to run. Somebody has to make sure they're running. Now you have a technology department. And it started with one or two guys working out of California and traveling, and then it morphed into, three and four, one in each region, making sure that, they're available to our teams every day of the week in case things happen. And, the same thing happened on the training side. We were training out of one location, and then it got too big and we had to start, formatting that so that we could have trainers in each of the regions. And that was the next thing that happened. And it just keeps growing as you get bigger. Uh, the nice thing for us is that with technology on the back end, we've been able to scale things pretty well.
Mhm.
We haven't had to grow as much on the technology side as we do on the people side and the training side, and making sure people know what they're doing, know how to do it, know how we like to do it. Um, and that takes a lot more effort and time.
Hey everyone, it's Carly. If you're really resonating with what we're talking about and want to get clear on what truly drives you, what your core values are, head on over to my website. In the tools and tips section, there is a free values assessment. And this is a quick exercise that's going to help you to uncover what actually matters most with you so you can lead and live with more clarity, fulfillment, and momentum. Okay, that's interesting. I'm curious as well because, as you're talking about this, that's a significant scale of individuals that are working for you. So as that started happening, it sounds like it was multiple locations at once, where it wasn't just, we're going to build this section and we're going to build this section. Like you're just kind of popping it
It
everywhere as things are growing.
it happened a little more orderly than that,
Yeah,
but there was some of that.
some
It's
overlap.
certainly, we would have people travel, and that was the easiest way. In Texas, it's easy because Dallas, San Antonio, Austin are all relatively close, and you're an hour plane ride from any given location. But at some point, the travel time starts eating into their ability to do their job.
Hmm.
And at some point, the size of the company just dictates that you need another person. And my owner was always very, very good about if we need somebody, hire them.
Yeah.
It was never, I want to shave on the payroll. As a matter of fact, it was quite the opposite. Sometimes I had to like hold back saying, no, 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 we don't need anybody just yet, but we'll get there. Um, he, at one point, he even came to me and said, Mike, he goes, I was acting as the general counsel as well as the chief operating officer. And he said, Mike, he goes, God forbid anything ever happened to you, but I wouldn't want to do your job. So we need to hire a another lawyer to be in house just in case. Now
Mhm.
that freed me up to do a lot of things. And he's now our general counsel. Because when I officially took over, I had to step back
Mhm.
from doing legal work. But that's just the way he was. He always wanted redundancy because he was always afraid of what happened if somebody left, which is not an idle fear,
Yeah.
particularly in a smaller company. But but it takes a special brand of owner to think like that. A lot of people are trying to see how little they can get by with, and we're looking at it from the opposite standpoint of how much better can we do if we have the right number of people to make this operation work? And is that going to show up on the revenue side and the other things? I mean, you know, technology has helped us trim our payrolls a little bit because more people can do, or fewer people can do more work now. Uh, but that doesn't mean I want too few.
Mhm. That's interesting. I'm curious too, because now that you have the private equity, what has been the difference in like employees? Are you utilizing employees from the rental side, or are you kind of scaling that is almost like a new division?
It's been a combination, and it's evolving as we go.
Mhm.
Initially, I own a brokerage which serves as our acquisition team, and a real good friend of mine runs that. Separate and apart. He's not involved in the multifamily at all, and he has a wealth of knowledge in our sector, the single tenant net lease retail sector. His wife joined us, is both a broker and our vice president of marketing and investor relations. And she does a lot of outside work. She's also not involved in the multifamily side at all. But more recently, as we've started to get to a point where I feel like things are going to pop, I've brought over our CFO and our chief operating officer and our general counsel from the multifamily side. They've seen where the future is as well, and they understand that this is all part of creating this company that is going to be different than the family office, but will be the next stage. So they've also come over, and that's given us a lot of weight to be able to do the things that I need to do. And quite frankly, I can't do it all.
Mhm.
I need to be the face. I need to be out raising money. I need to be supervising the rest of the operation, but uh, and keeping an eye on the real estate. But I can't be doing everything every day. So we've brought prop people on strategically to be involved in that, and that will probably continue to happen as we grow. Um,
Mhm.
we've been lucky to this point because what we're doing on the private equity side is everybody always asks me, "Where's your management team?" And I say, these are single tenant net lease properties. We don't pay expenses. The tenant does. All we have to do is make sure the insurance and taxes are paid, and we go out and visit them once a year to make sure the stores look good. There
Hmm.
really isn't a lot of I mean, I can manage this whole portfolio of single tenant stores when we build it out more easily than my smallest apartment complex because it just has less moving pieces. But at the same time, there are moving pieces. So you still need the people out there, but I've been able to get by with a much smaller team up till now.
Hmm.
But now as we're growing, it's going to have to scale out.
Yeah, I'm curious as well because have you mostly chosen to have apartment units and build those, or is it also like an equal amount of storefront? Where would you say you weigh heavier on that one?
They're going to operate differently. The multifamily portfolio is largely built. Right now we're finishing a 760 unit complex in Gilbert, Arizona. Um, Wonderful project. It should be done next March or so. And we're working on another 568 unit complex in Gilbert, also across the street from another one we own, which we're hoping to be able to start at the end of the year. But that one sort of, at least for the moment, is more on autopilot as we manage it and kind of strategically look to get rid of some assets and perhaps acquire a few new ones. The the single tenant on the opposite end is getting built out now. So there's a lot more focus on getting money in. As soon as we get money in, we can go deploy it. I just recently sold an office building I owned in San Antonio with my boys, and we're deploying that money, probably 3.5, $4 million into 3 or 4 more stores as we go buy them. The nice thing is there's plenty of them out there to buy. They're always on the market. You always see them. Um, but you have to, there's a lot of work in the background to find the right stores at the right price, and do the thing that's going to ultimately yield us money on the back end.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. I'm curious because even you going into Arizona and Texas, what made you choose those two locations?
Texas happened before I got there, although the first two properties he bought in Texas, I had him sell very early on when I got there because I looked at him and I was like, oh my God, what have you bought?
Hmm.
Um, but he went down there in the late 80s, early 90s when you could largely shoot a cannon through Texas and not hit anything. People don't remember that now because they know what Dallas has become and Austin and San Antonio and Houston. But it was more of the Wild West back then. There wasn't the kind of corporate center activity that you have now. And he took a shot. He was buying properties. We bought one for like $2,500 a door. There was some work that had to be done. I mean, ultimately it cost us about 10,000 a door, but you look at that now when buildings are trading for 200, 300 and up a door, 1,000 and up a door, and you're like, wow, that was pretty crazy. Um, and he bought a lot of properties from the alphabet soup of bank entities, the RTC, the FDIC, FISLIC, back when they were unwinding all the credit crisis, in the 89 to 91 recession. And he just started buying down there. When I got there, we got a little more orderly in how we were doing things. Now I got there after the credit crisis was over. So now we had to focus on market rate things, but we were still able to pull in some pretty nice properties at pretty nice prices. And his time horizon was forever. So we just hang around and manage the assets. Now we're renovating a lot of the assets that we own to bring them up to current conditions. Arizona was a little different. I was there when we got into Arizona, and we were looking around for what other markets did we like. What would be convenient. I know we looked at some deals in Orlando and Charlotte, North Carolina, and his thing was always, I don't want to be on a plane that long. He goes, I want to be on a plane for 3 hours. That's about as far as I can tolerate, which got us to Texas. I said, okay, well, if that's the case, then we probably want to be looking at some of the other Southwest markets like Arizona and Nevada and the Las Vegas area. We moved into Arizona pretty quickly thereafter, found a really nice couple of deals. And that started our Arizona presence. Now we had to build that team. That there was a lot of flying back and forth, and our regional manager from Texas was going to Arizona, and finally we said, no, that's enough of that. We're gonna hire a regional manager in Arizona. So we started building out that region, and that's for a long time we were building in Texas. We built one project in Dallas and then several in San Antonio, and probably 10, 12 years ago, he just decided that he was worried about the hail risk in Texas.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a
where
lot.
you can have golf ball size hail. And
One of
if you've
my
never,
clients is a
yeah,
roofer in
oh,
Texas, and whenever I talk to him and there's a storm, he's all jazzed up because he's like, "This is it. It's go time. Business is gonna pick up. I love the storms."
oh yeah, I bet he is. I probably have paid him at some point in time.
It's highly possible. He's
Um,
great though. He's really
yeah,
good.
no,
Yeah.
there's I know a lot of great roofers down there. Those are good guys and they take care of you. But we sort of were analyzing the risk and analyzing the relative markets and analyzing the relative property tax rates, and just found that we were getting a lot more for our money in Arizona, and we liked the way that market was growing. And really, we'd acquired a number of units, but then we started foraging for parcels of land, and we're now on our fifth project there, trying to get to number six. We really, really like the economy there. Yeah, it's overbuilt, but that goes away quickly. And I've been lucky enough or unlucky enough to have seen many, many cycles, and they all sort of look the same. Things get really, really good, and all the builders come in and they decide they're gonna build their properties. Then things get overbuilt, and rents go down, and all the builders close their doors and stop building, and then things get underbuilt, and things start to come back. We're sort of in that last part of this cycle, which I'm perfectly happy to be building now, because when we're done, we're going to be ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, you kinda have it when there's the need.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, and I've always said that it's true of any investing. You can't look at how things look today and make your decision based on how they look today. You always have to be looking out into the future as to what's it going to look like 6 months, 12 months from now, and what are the tea leaves telling you. There's a lot of great data out there if you look at it and figure out, well, you know what? Yeah, there's a lot of units on the market today, but when I start delivering all these units, that number is going to be dissipating and dwindling down to nothing. And, you know, I would rather take that kind of risk than, I liken it to what happened during COVID. COVID, the 21 to 23 period, were two of the best years. Matter of fact, they were the best 2 years I've ever seen. And it
Mhm.
had to do with a whole lot of factors, that not landlords gouging rent. It's just nobody was building anything.
Mm.
The number of people who wanted to live separate from anybody else was growing, and nobody wanted to move. So there were fewer and fewer units, and people were competing for them, and rents just went like crazy. Well, there were a lot of real estate guys that go, well, this is great. We're going to model this and we're going to build and we're going to grow like this for the rest of time.
Hmm.
Well, it never works out that way.
Yeah.
I mean, it was inevitably going to get to a point where we were oversupplied, and it did. And the last couple of years have been slow.
Mhm.
We've seen rents go down, and I always laugh when you listen, and it's the only political statement I will make, and it's nonpartisan. But when you listen to people talk about, we need more housing, and, builders are doing this or landlords are doing that. Anybody who builds for a living will tell you that the surest way to bring rents down is to have somebody build a property right next to yours.
Yeah.
And, if we just would build more, rents will come down naturally to
Hmm.
kind of their equilibrium spot. But that for 2 cents, that's what it's worth.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really interesting. Well, it's cool because it's kind of nice to know the different cycles that we're in. When you talk about like analyzing that data, what would you say is the data that you're looking at to see, hey, this economy is a growing economy? Like it's kind of in the low cycle, and like you saw in Arizona, like you see it in the low cycle, but it's still a growing economy. What's some of the data that you look at?
I mean, we're watching, relative income growth. We're watching population growth. We're watching all the metrics that, when I'm analyzing a store for our, real estate fund, a single tenant store, I'm looking at the same data. I want growing markets, ones where things are going. But there's other anecdotal things that you start to pick up on, announcements about businesses moving, you know, California punishing its residents and people
We're
wanting to move
losing
out.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, where are they going to go? Well, I have a pretty good idea that the next state over is probably going to be a good option. And you start paying attention to those kind of things also. I've never been a pure by the numbers guy. It's funny. I think back to my graduation from when I graduated from the MBA program in Michigan. And Michael Blumenthal, who was the Treasury Secretary at the time, actually was undergrad business school. He was the Treasury Secretary, and he came in, he gave a speech, and it was wonderful. Here's a top flight guy in the administration. He's done wonderful things, and he's saying, he goes, numbers are great, and everybody needs numbers. He goes, but be careful about taking those numbers and walking into your boss and telling them this is why it's a good deal because the numbers say it is. He goes, there's a lot more to what you're doing than numbers. And I've always sort of taken that to heart, that you have to look around, you have to get on the ground, you have to talk to people who are residents in these areas and see how they like it, see what they're thinking about those areas, particularly if you're going to make a big bet. I can make smaller bets and be okay, but if I'm going to make a big bet, like going into Arizona, I had lots of friends there and I would talk to them all the time. What are you seeing? What do you think? And we were getting a really good feeling that this was going to be a pretty good place to be. And, knock on wood, it's turned out to be the case.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, that's very cool. I'm curious too because I know that sometimes you're building, sometimes you're buying. Is there a strategy behind that at all?
Um, it's funny. Initially, we would do a mix. Uh, he- the owner of the company liked deals, and he liked to play around and do deals. And buying a property was always quicker than building a property. And at the time, we didn't have the land. We had some adjacent tracts of land next to complexes, so we were sort of almost an accidental builder. We were
Mm.
building because we had the land and we had nothing else to do with it, so we might as well make use of it. And we were still buying things. As we got a little more mature in the development process and learned a lot of things, I mean, I've had some great mentors uh, because I knew real estate, but I didn't know development, and I had to learn on the fly. And I hired people who knew a lot more than I did
Mhm.
to help us, and still do. Um, Once we got a little more sophisticated, we started to realize that we could get, we'd buy a property and then be like, well, it doesn't have this, it doesn't have this. We need to build this, we need to build that, we need to change this. We realized that when we were building property, we could get exactly what we wanted in exactly the location that we wanted. And that was pretty powerful. And we sort of, over the last 10 years, we've bought a couple of properties, but we've built, 4 times as many.
Mhm.
And it just sort of morphed into us becoming more development dependent. Um, Now, some of that, as he got older, he didn't want to take some of the chances that he would when he was younger. So I was a little more hamstrung in what I could do. For instance, he never wanted, we're spending a lot of our dollars on buying, but there's a number of properties which I really would have liked to have sold and bought younger, newer properties. And he was always afraid, well, what happens if we can't? What happens if we can't do the exchange and I get this big tax bill? And I get it. I mean, when you're in your 50s, 60s, you can tolerate that risk. When you get to your 80s and then
It's
90s,
different.
it's a little different and you're trying to protect things. And so, development became a lot more palatable because we could deploy our money. We were still buying great properties. It just was in a little different way.
Mhm. Oh, it's very cool. That's very cool. And do you think as
Yeah.
you move forward in the future, you're going to be doing more of the development just because it sounds like you have more insights onto needs, so you can really customize that to whatever you guys need to do?
It's interesting. I'm not so sure. I think we will still focus on development,
Mhm.
but development requires land.
Yeah.
And I'm not one of those guys that is going to buy land out in, the far reaches of a metropolis to wait for growth to get to me or to buy land and hang on to it for 10 or 15 years until, until development gets there. We've
Mhm.
always been very opportunistic in finding not necessarily infill parcels, but relatively close in parcels. We've done very well. We've been a little bit ahead of traffic, but by a mile, not by 15 miles. Um, there's some very wonderful areas in Arizona and even in some of the outer reaches of San Antonio that I think are going to be very attractive areas down the road. Um, might I buy a couple of parcels to get in the way of that and wait while I do other things? Yeah. But it gets harder and harder as cities get built out. And, I'm not sure at this point, we'll look at other markets, but I know the markets we're in very, very well.
Mhm.
And while I'm not that old, I'm not sure how many new tricks I want to learn
Yeah,
in
that's
terms of
fair.
finding different I mean, we were in Las Vegas for a while. We bought a property there and we realized we either had to get in or get out. And actually we bought it right after 9/11. As
Hmm.
a matter of fact, we had just bought it and I was on the ground in my hotel room. I flew in that whatever it was Monday night, and I don't remember the day of the week. But the next morning, my regional manager calls me. He says, "Are you here?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You okay?" I said, "Yeah." "Why?" He said, "Turn on the TV." I said, "What station?" He says, "Doesn't matter." And it was like to be in Las Vegas during
Mhm.
that was surreal. Um, and we went through all of that, but we did very well. We sold that property. We either had to get bigger or get out. And I was always worried about the economics in Las Vegas. I think they're
Mhm.
very good and it's become a lot of things and it's definitely developed. But when you hit recessions, people don't have gambling money. People
Yeah.
aren't going to stay in hotels. So it can be, and it was far more cyclical than what we would see. Dallas would be the same way. Dallas goes up and down. Phoenix to a lesser extent, and San Antonio even less than that.
Mhm.
But it was far less cyclical than was Las Vegas. And I just said, you know what? I think we've got a very attractive offer to buy the property we have. It was a guy turning it into condos. I said, I think this is a sign that it's time for us to take our money and go somewhere else. And
Mhm.
that's ultimately what we did. I can't tell you that that was the right decision or the wrong decision, but at the time, it was the right decision for us.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting because it's like you're seeing all the cycles everywhere else, but the extremes in that area were so much higher just because of the economical shifts that can impact it. It's really
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, look, you know, as I started out, Dallas wasn't always what it is today. I
Yeah.
mean, it now you can drive out in North Dallas and there's corporate headquarters as far as the eye can see. But it wasn't always like that.
Mhm.
But you could see the way they were starting to do business down there and you could see companies starting to move down there and 0% income tax rate is still pretty powerful.
It is.
Uh,
From us in
you know,
California.
yeah, yeah. I just, it's probably April 15th is not that far behind us. It's probably a little too soon to be talking about it.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm curious too, because I know that California is a market for you, but you haven't talked about it as much. Is it just not a market that you're as focused on right now?
We're really not focused on it, and there's a number of reasons. I mean, some of them are just governance.
Mhm.
It just becomes so difficult to do business here. Some of it, like on the net lease side, the way I always like to explain it, I mean, there's two reasons really. I'm buying high credit tenant stores, I'm buying stores with high credit tenants.
Mhm.
O'Reilly Auto, 7-Eleven, Sherwin-Williams, CVS. If I'm going to buy those stores, I'm really buying them because of the credit of the tenant, not as much about the real estate. So why would I accept, 5% in California when I can get 6.5% in North Carolina or Wisconsin or, Kansas? We're buying a couple deals in Kansas right now, outside of Kansas City, in beautiful suburbs, some of the best suburbs in the country.
Mhm.
And I was like, I can get 6.5% return instead of 5%. Why would I give that up? And then, you layer that in with some of the things that have happened over the last couple of years. And, I asked my friends, I said, look, would you want to own a CVS store in the middle of San Francisco right now? The
Yeah.
answer is probably not.
Yeah.
I think actually their mayor up there is doing a really good job starting to clean things up, and I hope he's successful. Um, But right now, they need to figure out that they're on the wrong path.
Mhm.
So we've looked largely elsewhere, and have
Mhm.
been reasonably successful doing that. I mean, all the states that we're in have very friendly business climates. It's one of the first things I look for,
Hmm.
uh, whether I'm buying net lease stores or whether I'm going to buy an apartment complex. I want places where businesses are likely to be moving in and not moving out. For
Yep.
starters,
Leaving California and they're going
yeah.
to.
Well, look, I mean, if you're buying a net lease store, we're buying neighborhood retail stores, but they still need neighborhoods and
Yes.
customers. So I want to make sure that we're buying them where that number is getting bigger and not smaller. Apartments the same way. We need residents. That's how we do it. When I build an apartment complex, we built 760 doors, or our building. I need to find 760 new families to live there,
Yeah.
or steal them from somewhere else. But ultimately, you have to rely on the fact that those neighborhoods, those geographic regions are growing.
Hey everyone, it's Carly. So, if this conversation is really hitting home and you want to get a real snapshot of what's working and what's not in your business, head on over to my website in the tools and tips section and you can have the business performance health check. In just about 15 minutes, you're going to see where the friction is and where your next growth opportunity lies within your company. Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. I'm curious too. So I know just a little bit more about like the business structure as you were building it and as it grew up to the 14,000 units. What would you say also operationally really had to shift within the company to be able to manage the new complexity?
I think a lot of it was technology. Um, we had always been relatively forward in a backward industry for technology, but we really had to get a lot more forward. There were just a lot of things that we couldn't do. You know, for instance, in the old days, you would do your own, and you wouldn't do your own credit screening, but you would review every application and you would review it carefully and check all the boxes. If you own 6 units and you got a bad tenant, you had a problem.
Mhm.
Um, Now with technology getting where it is and algorithms getting where they are in terms of analyzing likelihood of tenants to pay their rent, and
Mhm.
that whole process has evolved from a credit score to really a rating of that tenant, and not so much on what Experian or TransUnion say, but on how likely are these people to pay their bills. We've had to rely more on technology to help us manage that process. We rely, we have one system, uh, platform that analyzes all of our utility billing for us
Hmm.
to find anomalies. Because, when you own 6 or 10 units, you can look at the water bills and kind of see what's going on. When you own 38 complexes and, 14,000 units, not so much.
Yeah.
And you need to be even more involved. You know, eh, there are things that we will get even further along in, and we're exploring those now. Some of the things the owner always wanted to know what was going on and be able to see it. So there was some limitations on how far ahead we could get. But, we've already started to implement we've done a lot of looking at where we want to go next in terms of deploying technology to really help us analyze the data that's coming at us. Because you can have, and there is an immense amount of data available to you. And
Mhm.
with AI, it's getting even more and more, you know, involved. The question is, how do you package that data and what do you look at and what becomes meaningful to make decisions? And that's really where the technology is going to continue to grow and help us be able to run things more efficiently with you know hopefully the same number of people, but without going crazy in terms of building out a team.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, I mean, you say something that just it seems like all companies are now really learning how to utilize, like especially with AI and all these softwares that can be built so quickly. Everyone is learning how to utilize their data to build their
Yeah.
strategy, see what's next, and kind of drive the company, which is great. Like data is so
It,
powerful.
no, it really is. It's funny. I always like to say we like to be the second adopter, not the first.
Yeah.
I will let other people test it and figure out where all the problems are, and we're happy to wait until they've figured it out, and then we'll jump in. But there's a lot of great things out there. I mean, we just put a system in place, not necessarily technology, but it operates off of that, called Flex, that allows our tenants to pay in installments. Not
Mm,
us, but but it's just another tool in the toolbox to help the operational team get along.
yeah.
Um, and that's been nice. We're in the middle of deploying some stuff on the property management, the maintenance side, that will help our maintenance team. We literally just rolled out iPads to everybody on the
Yeah.
maintenance side. Little fearful of what they're going to do with them, but you know, being able to close out a work order with a punch on an iPad rather than having come back to the office and log into the computer is a lot more efficient for them.
Yeah. That's very cool. So you guys also do all your own property management?
We do.
Yes.
We manage everything we own and we own everything we manage. I don't touch fee management. Have never had an interest and don't let anybody else touch our property.
Yeah.
It's funny, a good friend of mine was the chairman of one of the REITs. I won't name it, but he said, "Are you nuts? Why are you managing your own properties?" And I just looked at him and I said, "Because we have ultimate control. I don't have to wonder where dollars are slipping out the door. I know
Yeah.
where they are, and I can stop that much more quickly than you can." Is it a little bit of a bigger pain in the you know what? Yeah, it is. But at the same time, I just hired a team and I have guys who run that team and they're very good at it. And I still focus on what I would focus on and leave the day-to-day management to the folks in the field, but we have a lot more control over what's going on. And I think because of that, we see things more quickly.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. My mom has some property and we have a property manager, but she's very meticulous. And so it's interesting to see month to month the things that she catches that they don't catch. So you were
Yeah.
very accurate in that. And if she wasn't that
Mhm.
meticulous, it's like it just wouldn't be caught.
No,
It's just
I mean,
fascinating.
there's just no way.
Yeah.
I mean, we have one supervisor basically for every 6 or 7 properties. When you look at some of the big management companies, it'll be one for every 20. I mean,
Yeah.
you do the math.
Yeah.
It's just they just can't see what they need to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully that changes with all the data and technology and AI. Hopefully they
I
up their game a
yeah.
little bit. Yeah.
We'll just check in with our AI agent, and they'll tell us what we need to do today, and it'll be like George Jetson. I pushed 5 buttons today and got my
Right.
job done.
It is true. Um, it's funny. Okay, so I'm also curious as well because I know that the company has transferred into you as the person who is now running the company. So tell me a little bit about what that transfer looked like. And was that something that you guys really planned slowly over time, or was it something that happened more abruptly?
No, we had been looking at it for a while, and, obviously, is the patriarch of the family aged? It was I mean, you knew what was going to happen, you just didn't know when. And, he was an interesting person. I mean, like a lot of very wealthy people, he had a very unique personality. Uh, a lot of it was in the micromanagement phase. And, we knew we had to get away from that because it had repercussions all the way down the line. So we sort of had a playbook of what we were going to do when we had the opportunity. And a lot of that had to do with very quickly changing the company culture from, oh my God, I'm afraid I'm going to get yelled at if I do something wrong, to, no, it's okay to make mistakes. I want you to think
Mm,
about what you're doing. I want you to own your process and own, if you're a manager, you're running your apartment complex. I want you to own that. And I want you to act like an owner and
mm,
make decisions based on that. And let's talk about them. We'll give you the tools to be able to analyze things. We'll teach you better, but I'm not going to come yell at you because you missed a line on a form that you sent up to me. I, you know, don't make the same mistake twice, but
mhm.
you have to, everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah.
So let's focus on the good we're trying to do and the culture we're trying to create. And part of it was, he was a very private person, and we're probably the least known property management company that manages as many units as we do. And I said, that has to change. I mean, if we want to be out in the world and hire great employees and grow and do the things that ultimately we want to do, we need to be much better known, which means we need to be more outward looking and less inward looking. And we started to change that. I mean, I'm taking 15 people down to the National Apartment Association event in New Orleans in June. Just part of it is a reward, part of it get out in the world, see what other people are doing, talk to
Mhm,
your peers, get some education, let's have a good time, and let's let other people know who we are and what we're doing out there. And that process has started, and it's been fun because the guys have come to me with ideas of, can we do this, can we do that? One was, look, we require all our guys to have their own tools. Can we just give them a $300 tool allowance when they come work for us so that they can, because it's going to go a long way with the maintenance techs and doesn't really cost the company all that much. I said, yeah, great idea. I was walking around a property in Dallas a couple months ago, and one of the maintenance guys said, oh man, thank you for that tool allowance. My guys just love it. I said, well, that's great. Now they'll want to stay here because they
yeah.
know that we're thinking about them. And there was a lot of that kind of thing where it was a push pull situation that I needed to get rid of the friction. And, we're getting there. The nicest thing for me was that without me saying a word, my team came to me with an employee statement. Like, this is our motto. This is our creed. This is what we want to
Oh,
be. It was like a 3 paragraph, short paragraph thing. This is what we believe. And that just blew me away. I said, okay, I've hit home.
yeah.
Now they're thinking like I want them to think because this is what I want them to do. And they said, well, what do you think? I said, I got a couple minor little changes, but by and large, it was great. I said, the only thing that I ask, this isn't something that you put in a book and stick in a drawer. It's not something you look at once and file away in your emails. This
Mhm.
has to be the way you think about the job every single day. If you can promise me that that's what you're going to convey down to your teams, then I'm good with us doing this.
Mhm.
And they were like, absolutely. Now, we'll see how that takes, but you have to start someplace.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. I'm curious here, how long would you say it's taken you to actually shift and change the culture within the company so that it's starting to naturally bring forward inspired individuals, grateful individuals to work there?
It took me very little time to
Yeah,
start setting the tone of what I expected. And all my senior leadership team who knew me, and we would have these meetings about where we were going to go, what the next stage was going to be, knew what I wanted. So the actual from start to, okay, we're rolling was very, very quick.
cool.
How long does it take for that to start seeping in? We'll see. It's a work in process. I
Yeah,
mean, it's been 6 months. I think people through our actions are starting to get the feeling that this is real. They're not picking up the phone. They're not afraid to pick up the phone because somebody may be calling to yell at them about some minor little thing that they didn't even know about. Now they're sending ideas to us.
mhm,
When that starts to happen, that they've sort of embraced this. Okay, I don't have to be fearful of my job. I need to do a good job, and if I do a good job, there's nothing to be fearful of. Um, it's not going to be based on some. We're going to look at the bigger picture when we analyze how people are doing. How is your property doing? Are you keeping up with the market? Are you exceeding the market? Are you lagging behind the market? How are your maintenance dollars going? Are you keeping up with what other people do? Are you keeping up with what we've done in the past? Are you saving money where we need to save money? We're gonna look at things that are important and stay away from things that really are picayune, that don't move the needle at all, but definitely move the attitude barometer,
mhm.
significantly.
Yeah, that's inspiring. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing everything about your company, about what you're up to. I really appreciated all your insights. And if listeners want to find out more about your company, where should they go?
Well, the easiest way, our website is guardiannetlease.com. That'll give you all the information on what we're up to. People are certainly free to email me. I always respond to all my emails personally, not through an AI agent. And that's Mike at guardian-advisory.com. Happy to answer anybody.
Awesome. And I'll put the link in the show notes as well. And if anyone enjoyed this, and feel free to share it with someone else who you think would be inspired by it as well. And thank you again for coming, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Carly. It was a pleasure.